I'm going to ask Isabel Duxfeld, the Regions Working Group and SMC Platform Coordinator and Communications and Membership Manager at Polis Network, to come join me to present the Gender Imbalance in the Transport Sector, a Toolkit for Change, a Sum for All Gender Working Group report. And she's going to give you more information. Welcome, Isabel.
Hello. So apologies for the change of agenda. You've got me. So I'm going to present a report that Heather Allen and I, Heather is at the back, have been working on over the last few months as part of the Sustainable Urban Mobility for All Gender Working Group. Many of you are in the room, and I think part of this is a thank you to all of you who have helped work on this with us and for your support on this. So it's really fantastic. And as I said, it'll be launched tomorrow. So like every good researcher, I'm not going to give you the IMDb version short synopsis of it. You'll have to read it. I expect all of you to read it. But it will be launched tomorrow. So I thought what I would do today is give you a kind of reminder of the reasons for this work and what we hope to achieve by this work, and a kind of summary of why not just this work is important, but everything that we're doing today. So this work is a global analysis of women's employment in the transport sector. What we've done is we've taken a global cross-modal investigation into the state of women's employment in the transport sector and their lived experiences. So not just a breakdown of statistics, but what we've done is we did extensive interviews with women across the sector, a bunch of surveys, to understand what are the key barriers to working and entering the sector and remaining in the sector. Why do women not enter the sector? Why do they leave early? And what are their barriers to career progression? So I think have next slide. Oh my God. Look at me. So I thought I'd begin with this. These are the latest figures on, so it's gender balance on ministers by sector. And I wonder if any of you can locate transport. Go right to the bottom, just above religion. So this is what we're dealing with. And so this is kind of our point of departure here. So what we did is all of us in this room know transport has a gender problem. And so what we did is we wanted to know what this looks like on the ground and why, despite quite over the last decade, a ramping up of policies both on an international and national and regional level, why is the change on the ground so slow? So the goal was to identify some of the key challenges, to really understand how practitioners in the sector can use this to create change. What do they need? What we did was we put ourselves in the shoes of a practitioner. You know that you have a gender problem in your organisation, and as we saw across our research, there is an overwhelming understanding that they do have a gender problem, and they do want to address this. People across the sector do want to address this, but they're saying to us, we don't know how. So we put ourselves in their shoes and we said, okay, how do I get from A to B? How do I get the projects going? How do I ensure their longevity? How do I collect a really kind of organisational wide change, not just individuals working on this? So what we did is, I think these are some old slides, but that doesn't matter. So what we did was, through the work, we identified 5 key barriers to women's employment in the sector. And as you can see here, and I'm not going to dive into them fully, because again, I'd like you to read the research. But what we saw is we've seen extensive gender stereotyping remaining. We've seen discriminatory work cultures, what we're calling invisible glass ceilings. So you might have heard of the glass ceiling, but what we're saying is that people do recognise, and people are putting in policies to say that yes, we should have X number of women in leadership positions, in board positions, but actually women are still struggling to get to these positions because of the ways that career progression and promotional opportunities still work. And a lot of these are very specific to the transport sector. The ways that women and everybody in the organisation makes their way up from the bottom to the top is still really restrictive on the ways that on women. And then we kind of situated this within wider behavior and cultural change. So this kind of builds on the last panel, what they were talking about intersectional experiences. How does gender intersect with race, with sex, with socioeconomic situations? And so what we did was, after these key barriers, we have a toolkit. And as I said, it kind of puts you in the shoes of a practitioner, and it's really extensive. We have case studies from across the world, from organizations who you may not have even heard of, but they are doing some really fantastic things around gender equality. So we have things about the way that rosters work, the way that flexible working is introduced, the way that you can trial part-time periods of work and things like this, and childcare arrangements that are being introduced. So this is from everything. What's really interesting and what's fantastic about presenting this here is that these are people across transport. So we have shared mobility, we have public transport, we have maritime, we have aviation. And so what we have is these are very, very different sectors, but they're all facing a similar challenge. And so they're all finding very, very innovative ways to create more gender-balanced employment. And there is a lot to learn. So there is a lot that maritime can learn from aviation, who can learn from public transport. And so this is a little nice thing created by my colleague. So as you can see, that these are some of the people that we talk to. Many of you are in the room. And that is going back. That doesn't matter. So that is finished. But I think what I'd like to end on is that something that Sanal said earlier. She said there is a graveyard of pilot projects in India. There are also a graveyard of reports. And what is really interesting, and what I think Heather and I's point here, is that the words on this page are not going to make a change in themselves. It's the way that the recommendations that are made, the experience that is shared, are used by those across the sector and those reading it, and what they do with that information. And not just the information here, but there are a lot of reports and toolkits which address gender equality in many, many different ways. And there is a lot of work out there, and it's the way that this work is built on and how it is used. And I think so many of you attending the ITF over the next few days will see a lot of new research and a lot of new pilots and a lot of new projects. And it is about the learning that we get from that we don't just forget what is shared there. So what I would do is really encourage you not just to read this report, but all of the stuff you read, to think, what can I do with this information? How can I make sure that I don't just read this and just put this to one side? And I think that is really easy to do, given our age of LinkedIn, Twitter, and things like this. We're always inundated with new information, new reports, but how can we really use that information? So I think that's fine. And please attend the launch tomorrow.